This message comes from NPR sponsor Home Instead. Home Instead provides adaptable in-home senior care plans from qualified, compassionate caregivers that lend a hand when you need it most. Learn more at homeinstead.com. Home Instead, for a better what's next.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Have you heard of this guy named Bryan Johnson? Tech centimillionaire turned health guru? Maybe you know him from when he started getting infusions of his own son's blood.
Thanks for the plasma. No worries.
Or for saying that he wants to live forever.
To put it simply, you don't want to die.
Yeah, that's right.
Or how he turned that idea into a movement he's calling Don't Die.
Don't die is a religion. Don't die is an economic system. Don't die is a political system. Don't die is an ethical, moral, and social system.
If this seems bombastic, it's because it is. I think he's smart about how to make things go viral, to share his ideas about how to live and therefore how not to die, which includes some pretty basic stuff. Here's journalist Michelle Santiago-Cortez.
He's doing a lot of common sense things like prioritizing sleep. I think he's the most bullish on sleep. He's minimizing his sun exposure. He's exercising.
And he also does some stuff that isn't so basic. Like a kind of gene editing that hasn't been approved by the FDA, or not eating past 11 a.m., or wearing a hat that shoots red lights into his scalp. And for a while, he was taking the same medication that keeps people from rejecting their donated organs. This one guy is pretty extreme about longevity, but he's not the only one. The longevity industry is worth over $25 billion, and other tech magnates are bought in too. But it's all left me wondering, in the words of Freddie Mercury, just who wants to live forever and why? And what does that mean for the rest of us? To get into what might be a new religion of longevity and what it has to do with the prediction of total AI takeover, I'm joined by Michelle, who you heard earlier.
Thanks for having me.
And journalist Tara Isabella Burton.
Thank you so much for having us.
Let's get into it. So to start off, all the stuff Bryan Johnson is doing to try to not die, do we know anything about the efficacy of all of it?
I mean, I guess that's kind of like the million-dollar question, because he claims his protocol, which he calls Blueprint, is science-based, evidence-backed. He often refers to it as an algorithm. Some of these things are proven, some are not, and that kind of is what makes his, let's say, his influencing, because so far that's really mostly what it is, compelling. He's trying all kinds of interventions. There's no way of knowing what interventions are successful because he's doing a bunch of them at once. You know, there's no control variable. There's only one Bryan.
So though Bryan is particularly intense about this stuff, he's not the only one who's into longevity. There's a whole community of people, most of whom are, you know, kind of rich tech bros like him or adjacent to that world. Sam Altman and Peter Thiel are also investing in longevity. And stay with me while I'm explaining this. There is an island off the coast of Honduras that has much more relaxed regulations. So companies doing longevity science like MiniCircle, which does gene editing, these companies can bypass the FDA while on the island. And there's demand for that. I think it's normal for people to be interested in living a longer life. But Tara, why to this extreme within this group of people? And why now?
So I see the current interest in longevity research as having, in part, a religious character. I think we can look at it as part of a whole bunch of things happening, particularly in the tech world, but in the culture more broadly, that have a kind of spiritual sensibility around the idea of developing the post-human. This is associated with the transhumanist movement, with biohacking, with other forms of life optimization. But the idea behind it, in many cases, is that what it means to be human is to transcend our own humanity, to defeat death in the case of longevity research, or in the case of building AI, to build the thing that comes next? What if we build God rather than worship God? And Bryan Johnson is explicit about this on X. He specifically says, like, level 1 is you start a company. Level 2 is that you start a country. Level 3 is a religion.
Oh.
Level 4 is don't die. And level 5 is become God. So he's, not exactly being subtle about it.
He's not being coy. Yeah.
This is not just that he wants to live forever because, he personally wants to live forever and things would be kind of cool. He very much sees this as the frontier of the human experience. He is leading the charge to the post-human age.
Science and religion weren't always in opposition to each other, historically speaking. And as they've been separated and competing in terms of who gets the final say of what it means to be alive and what this earth means, I think that the science camp has proven to be a bit more lucrative, where someone like Bryan Johnson can kind of build a church that sells olive oil and protein bars. I'm not one to speak on the lives of the uber wealthy, but I would imagine that you conquer finance, you conquer land, you conquer, quote unquote, like the laws of physics and stuff through these technologies. Why not conquer the laws of biology? I think it's like a conquest mindset thing.
That is also a really compelling point.
Like, we don't live in a time when you're going to get charged with heresy and, tortured for those kinds of goals. You get VC funding for that now.
That is an excellent point. I read one piece in the New Yorker by David Owen that theorized, and to quote him, simple arithmetic shows that if they live a normal lifespan, they won't have time to spend enough of their money. And Johnson himself described the time that he's added to his life as a new kind of wealth creation. The old adage, like people say, time is money. And these guys already have a lot of money. What do you think about that?
This is all happening in and against the backdrop of the attention economy. Our time is money in a very particular way now, because more and more of us, in terms of how we consume media, how we live our lives, so much of it online, our attention is, in fact, monetizable. Our time makes money for other people. Something I don't want to overlook about Bryan Johnson is that he is also, in some ways, could be considered a wellness influencer.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
His fame, his public persona, he is able to do what he's doing in part because we are watching it. We can't look away. He is a fascinating reality show character. We watch the documentary that was made about him. We read his tweets. And so he simultaneously perhaps is extending his own lifespan, but he's also a kind of very measurably taking from our lifespan in the sense that our time is being dedicated to him.
At the same time, the healthcare system in this country is famously dysfunctional. It can be hard to access. It can be prohibitively expensive. And one survey shows that doctors and their staff spend, I'm sorry, I have to give a dramatic pause here, the equivalent of 2 full business days every week just dealing with insurance companies. Good healthcare plans cost more. And so does living a healthy lifestyle that keeps people from a lot of types of sickness and death. Is a long life a kind of luxury?
People today are less and less able to save up for retirement. Like, imagine the torture of having to save up for an extra 20 years. Like, I don't think most people are in a financial position to finance the last 10 years of their life, much less an additional 30. So I almost feel like only someone with money to spare could think of it as an attainable goal.
Absolutely. In an era where saving for retirement is a kind of a source of stress and impossibility for so many, the idea that infinite time is something to be looked at only with desire rather than fear does mean a long life is for the wealthy.
Coming up, how is longevity related to the fear of an AI takeover?
What Bryan Johnson is doing, or claims to be doing, is kind of serving as a model for what it might look like to basically be a priest in the religion of AI.
Stick around.
This message comes from Sony Pictures Home Entertainment, presenting Paddington in Peru, the irresistible movie that critics say is a funny, heartwarming adventure for the whole family. Certified fresh and verified hot on Rotten Tomatoes. Watch at home on digital today. Rated PG.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Amazon Prime Video, presenting Common Ground, a film about the power of agriculture to reshape the planet through sustainable farming. Featuring Jason Momoa, Laura Dern, Donald Glover, Rosario Dawson, and Ian Somerhalder, Common Ground profiles a movement of farmers using regenerative models of agriculture that could balance the climate, save people's health, and stabilize America's economy. Now streaming only on Prime. This message comes from Charles Schwab. When it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it. You can also invest on your own and trade on Thinkorswim. Visit schwab.com to learn more. This message comes from Mint Mobile. If you're tired of spending hundreds on big wireless bills, bogus fees, and free perks, Mint Mobile might be right for you with plans starting from $15 a month. Shop plans today at mintmobile.com/switch. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5GB plan required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
Going back to Bryan Johnson, the other thing I'm really struck by is how heavily edited Johnson's own desires are. Like, he says he's trying to eliminate his quote unquote rascal mind, like the part of him that wants to eat pizza or stay up late, which I'm like, that's my full brain. He's got a team of doctors working with him to try to stop his aging, but he also has, as you said, an algorithm run his life for him to take, the human rascal brain out of control. And I'm really interested in that piece. All of this longevity stuff for him is really wrapped up in his beliefs about AI. He says that AI superintelligence is inevitable and that, quote, we are at risk of extinction without a unifying framework to solve human alignment and AI alignment. It's about making sure we exist long enough to figure out what's next. So these things, they don't logically follow to me. Could you explain what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, it's like deeper than you can imagine. This algorithm, the rascal brain, right? I feel like he's appealing to this conception that science is somehow more rational, purer, more enlightened than this disgusting, sticky mess of a human body, right? Science is almost like second to God and like who knows best and what's the best form of knowledge.
There's been this real Silicon Valley longstanding tradition of thinking you can use science and technology to hack yourself. But more recently, and I think more relevantly to both the Bryan Johnson's desire to get rid of his rascal brain, as well as the interest in the power of AI, is a community known as the rationalist subculture, or the rationalist community.
Oh.
And this is a bit of an umbrella term for what basically started out as commenters and readers of a group of blogs, most notably Overcoming Bias, Less Wrong, and Slate Star Codex, that claim to basically help people think better. The idea is that you're a human, you're a dumb animal, you have self-serving biases and ways you look at the world that make you dumber. Here's how not to do that. Certainly there are ways you can, in fact, train your brain to not make certain kinds of errors. But it really turned into a close subculture that had some kind of quasi-religious qualities. That language about self-overcoming became part of, let's say, the tech world mainstream. And a lot of rationalists as well were also interested in the problem of AI alignment, and particularly the X risk, the existential risk that someone might accidentally create an artificial intelligence that is hostile to humans and wipes us out. How do you address that fear? One answer is to stop AI development. One is to ensure that whatever AI you are creating wants to work with humans or is going to be friendly to humans.
Yeah, or in Johnson's case, that he can be around to figure out the answer.
Absolutely.
This is the thing, though. Okay, so I think where I'm at with all this is I'm surprised that this total belief that AI is going to take over, and it's either going to be a good thing or it's going to be a bad thing, but either way, we need to be prepared. And that's what Bryan Johnson says is behind his movement, or religion as he has called it, Don't Die. But where are we seeing that belief about AI shaping our culture in other ways?
This is where it can get a bit unnerving. If you were on Twitter in the last 2-3 years, where Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Andreessen and all these other tech people were having discussions about how important AI is, how urgent it is, what should we do with it? Some people kind of cycled through these labels that we would often see on their bios. For example, some people would say, if we don't accelerate AI, we're all going to die. And so there's accelerationism. Or they would call people that would say, hey, we need a bit more regulation on AI. We need to pump the brakes. They would call them doomers. So it was very much a part of the public discourse about basically framing AI as an existential milestone. Basically saying that we are on the cusp of developing a technology so powerful. And this is the part where it's up for discussion. It's so powerful, it will make death become obsolete, or it's so powerful that it might kill us, so we have to be really nice to it, or it's going to solve all our problems, so it's our moral imperative that we give it everything we've got. I think what that did was create an urgency, right? Not coincidentally, AI requires a boatload of water, boatload of power, a boatload of fossil fuel to make it happen. So I do feel like a lot of this was their making appeals to mobilize resources. They'll basically promote their product as the one solution to all of humanity's problems. If only you invest all your money into them, if only you deregulate, let them have access to all the water, to all the fossil fuel so they can advance their technologies. It seems convenient that the product you're selling is going to solve the world's problems and it's urgent, right? And I know it's cynical, but at the end of the day, Bryan Johnson is selling oil.
Literally a $35 bottle of olive oil called snake oil. Okay, so I get that part, but another thing I have trouble wrapping my head around is how monastic his life is. As we said, he has no pizza, no late night hangs with friends. He's trying to eliminate the human tendency to want things that may be bad for our bodies, but are, at least for me, good for the soul. I guess I want to know, what's the point of living forever if you cut out some of the things that, for me, make life pleasurable?
So I'm torn on this. Is this for the clout, whether or not it's for financial gain? But at the same time, I think it's also true that there is a long historical tradition of people living lives that are incredibly physically unpleasant or characterized by deprivation because they have chosen to do so in order to focus their attention and love on the ultimate reality. Historically, these have been religious people. These have been hermits or mystics or monks who have willingly taken on a particular kind of life in order to focus on the hereafter. And what interests me, if let's assume Bryan Johnson is in good faith here, is that what does it look like to want to have a life that is focused on the ultimate form of transcendence, a life that is focused on, what you believe to be God, if you don't believe in a transcendent higher power? And I think what Bryan Johnson is doing or claims to be doing is kind of serving as a model for what it might look like to basically be a priest in the religion of AI.
Yeah, I think something to layer with Tara's point is that what strikes me, I guess, sad about not him specifically, but the way he frames the rascal brain being this horrible thing and AI or technology almost being that benevolent God that's watching over and everything. What really saddens me is that dichotomy, right? Between the smart, enlightened, rational science and the sticky, gooey, nasty work of being human, the dirtiness of it all, the messiness of it all. I think there is a beauty to being human that I feel like this rhetoric around AI and living forever. Personally, I don't want to live 120 years of non-messy, perfectly ascetic life. I guess when we're thinking about these people that are actually designing our futures, like, are we getting designed out of it? You know, might we be deemed too messy, too human, too rascal-brained to belong?
Are we seeing this longevity obsession leach out into the wider culture? And if so, how is it showing up?
The kinds of high-level interventions Bryan Johnson is doing are not really accessible to most people. But I don't necessarily see a strong distinction between what he's doing and two different subcultures, one of which is the wellness subculture, which is usually more sort of traditionally female-coded, I'd say, and life optimization or life hacking, which is often coded as masculine. I think we're seeing this proliferation of the idea that we owe it to ourselves to be our best selves. Not necessarily morally, but in terms of how much work you put into self-improvement. You are earning your worth or proving your worth by constantly working on yourself.
My gosh. You know, even just looking at celebrities, I've seen David Beckham is selling longevity pills, and there's another company called Tally Health that's also getting investments from people like John Legend and Zac Efron. This stuff is out there. But Michelle, any final thoughts from you? How else are you seeing this obsession with longevity reach out into our wider culture?
Yeah, I think it's almost like you could call it a perfect storm of one of our fastest growing consumer sectors being wellness and tech are working together to create kind of this hybrid of longevity as a new kind of market category to expand on. Longevity, for me personally, I am vigilant about how this shaking of the hands between tech and wellness, to me, it does seem like cementing that ideology in the public, that machine is better, science knows better, their science knows better. I mean, I don't want to be a pessimist about it, but I do feel like it's a lot of very clever marketing, and I do think it's going to pay off for them.
Michelle, Tara, you have given me so much to think about today. I don't even know if y'all know, but this was a really great conversation. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You just heard journalists Tara Isabella Burton and Michelle Santiago Cortez. And I'm going to put on my influencer hat for a minute and ask you to please subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening. Click follow so you know the latest in culture while it's still hot. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Liam McBain.
This episode was edited by
Nina Pathak.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Learning. IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid no matter the age or personality. Get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when you sign up today at IXL.com/NPR. This message comes from Warby Parker. What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost, like free adjustments for life. Find your pair at warbyparker.com or visit one of their hundreds of stores around the country. Support for NPR and the following message come from Rosetta Stone, the perfect app to achieve your language learning goals no matter how busy your schedule gets. It's designed to maximize study time with immersive 10-minute lessons and audio practice for your commute. Plus, tailor your learning plan for specific objectives like travel. Get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off and unlimited access to 25 language courses. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.